Ever since season 1 of Miraculous Ladybug, there's been a villain looming in the background of the show. Where Hawkmoth and Myura make extravagant displays in their attempted grabs of power, this villain sat and planned. Where Shadowmoth combined a mix of natural and unnatural wickedness, this villain waited patiently. Where Monarch fumbled despite having nearly every single Miraculous at the palm of his hand, this villain excels with just one. This villain is Lila, the chameleon herself. Miraculous has really put in the effort to show off what kind of villain we're going to be seeing in season 6, and so far, we've seen plenty. There's a theory floating around the community regarding a new addition to season 6, that being the character of Aglae, a nervous, soft-spoken, and easily scared girl who has made her way into the fold of Marinette's friend group. The theory states that this shy and vulnerable girl is actually Lila in disguise. Well, to quote the late and great Carl Sagan, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So let's see what evidence there is. But before we analyze any evidence, I need to preface something that will be relevant until the end of the video. Miraculous Season 6, before it even started airing, was said to follow as a whodunit, like The Usual Suspects, where you have to piece together the mystery, and when you watch everything back, you'll be punching yourself for not noticing the details you missed. So let me ask you a question, dear viewer. What makes a whodunit movie a whodunit? What separates The Hateful Eight from Knives Out? Glass Onion from The Usual Suspects? There are a lot of viable answers, but the one I'm going for is the use of the classic detective's curse. The detective's curse, in one sentence, is when a detective trying to solve a crime has the answer right in front of his face. He just can't see it. Most of the time it's from tunnel vision, focusing on one theory and trying to make it work. Other times it's from bias. Evidence points to one person, but the detective's perception of that person trumps his usual skepticism and analytical approach to the facts of the case. No matter what it is, in my opinion, a whodunit cannot be classified as a whodunit without making the viewer fall victim to the detective's curse. Why, you may ask? Because the only way a whodunit can work successfully is if all of the information is out on the table. If you hide information or change it in retrospect, as opposed to revealing information that alters how a viewer watches the scene, then you no longer have a whodunit. You have a regular drama or thriller. Whodunits thrive off the detective's curse. Think of The Usual Suspects, Scream 1, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. They work because when a viewer rewatches the movie, they notice things that they didn't notice the first time. But if there's no information to notice, then there's no rewatch factor, and certainly no audience realization. Please keep this in mind while we go over the evidence. What evidence do you have to support this claim? So I went back and watched all three. Wait, 3? Aglae is only in 3 episodes? That don't sound right. Either way, the evidence is present and prevalent today. Let's start with Exhibit A, generalities. At the end of Season 5, Lila clearly showed that she is going to enroll and attend the new school that Marinette and her friends would be going to. With the twist of an undercover Lila infiltrating the friend group to be pulled off well, it needs to be a character who gets an okay amount of screen time and reasonably could be Lila. Aglae fits this as she is new to the friend group, could reasonably be Lila in disguise minus a few tweaks that could require some work. And Aglae has gotten the most screen time out of any of the new additions to Marinette's friend group. Prem and Diane have gotten significantly less screen time, and Sublime is missing her legs, which Lila can't really imitate. Lastly, Aglae has a plant-based name like Lila/Cerise's flower-based names. Aglae is just algae letter shifted, a clear connection between the previously established naming convention Lila uses. Exhibit B, Climatiqueen. In this episode, which is Aglae's first appearance, there's already so much pointing the finger in her direction. For starters, look at this shot of Aglae talking to Aurora and compare it to this shot of Chrysalis talking to Aurora. The parallelism here is too blatant to deny, and to repeat for emphasis, this is Aglae's first appearance. Aglae also hugs Aurora to comfort her, much like Lila did to Kagami back in Season 5. Chrysalis also brings up the book that Aurora wanted, the book she told Aglae about during their first conversation. Aglae is also left alone by Adrian and Marinette, which would give her ample time to talk to Climatiqueen in Chrysalis form. And isn't it strange that Chrysalis doesn't talk to Climatiqueen till after Aglae is left alone? In Aglae's debut, it's clear that the writers and animators are trying to convince us that Aglae is not all that she seems to be. Exhibit C, Dark Castle. In this episode, there's another example of parallelism, that being when Marinette and her friends are explaining Alex's dilemma to the newest additions to the group. At the end of the explanation, there's a shot of Ladybug, Cat Noir, and Chrysalis in the graphic. And when the thought is interrupted, who do we see standing on screen? Ladybug, Cat Noir, And Chrysalis? Then at Aglae's birthday party, we see Aglae present, petting a rabbit at one point, and she's the one who notices Marinette's absence. Pretty strange the writers choose to have Aglae say that line instead of, oh, I don't know, her boyfriend? This plays into the ending where Lila notes that Marinette wasn't at the party, leading her to eventually test Marinette in Vampagami. How would Lila obtain this information if she wasn't Aglae? We also see Aglae leave the party after Alia says that it's time for cake, and soon after, there's an akumatized villain. And to our knowledge, Aglae doesn't return. She isn't in the end card, so where did she go? Exhibit D, Reckless Driver. This episode is the prosecution's pièce de résistance. Let's start with Aglae's retelling of her akumatization by Chrysalis. For starters, it's stated that she is the first victim of Chrysalis, which takes a lot of suspicion off her. Why would people suspect the first victim to be the perpetrator at all? We also never see her talk to Chrysalis, and she glosses over that part when telling the story. Why gloss over it? Why not show it to the audience? I mean, we've all heard of the phrase show don't tell. Next, we see that she gets akumatized into a butterfly themed hero who literally puts people into cocoons. And when Aglae gets aggressive with a therapist, why doesn't Chrysalis target the clearly more distraught Aglae than the slightly uncomfortable therapist? Not to mention that Aglae runs into the elevator, forcing her friends to the stairs. This isolates her and is fast enough to outpace people going down the stairs, which gives her time to release an Akuma unseen. When Aglae gets captured by Reckless Driver, we get a scan of her brain which shows she is afraid of bugs. While we don't have exact confirmation that Lila is afraid of bugs, we do see her shoo away an Akuma in the London special, showing she at least has some disdain for them. And with that being said, the prosecution rests its case. What evidence do you have to negate this claim? The defense has a sizable amount of evidence, and we believe we can bring sufficient doubt to the claims made by the prosecution, starting with the generalities. While it's true that the show is implying that Lila's going to be attending the school next year, it is not out of the norm for Miraculous to set up a Chekhov's gun and then not use it. This happened with Adrian and Gabe's identity reveal, and it's not entirely impossible that Miraculous is using this to create buzz about who Lila could be, when it's very possible that no one is Lila. Not to mention the many physical differences they share, which would be really hard to remedy. For example, the skin tone shift Lila would have to do to pass off as Aglae is pretty extreme. Possible, but extreme. Whether it's using foundation or chemicals like arbutin, it'd be pretty difficult. Another is facial shape, where Aglae clearly has a more round face compared to Lila's sharper face when going to the chin. Another is facial structure. Aglae's nose is much bigger than Lila's and further from her upper lip than Lila's. Exhibit B. There are lots of problems with the conclusion the prosecution has reached. For starters, while this could be a parallelism pointing to Aglae's secret alter ego, it could also be a common motif used by the show, or even more simpler, a common shot used when two characters are speaking and is meant to be blatantly portraying one as a listener as opposed to a contributor to the conversation. This really is just a common motif. I mean, here it is in Sublimation, and here it is in Where Papa's. Also, trying to pass off a hug as parallelism? Pretend to be the writer of this scene, and imagine the Doyleist reason for this hug. In your mind, you'd say, you know what's a low-key way to hint that this character is Lila? Make Aglae hug like Lila. No writer would ever think of that as a valid way to hint at something because it isn't something you notice on a rewatch. It's something you have to jump to conclusions to try to make work because of how illogical it is as a reason to support your claim. While it's true that Aglae was told about the book, we've seen Hawkmoth and Chrysalis talk about subjects relevant to a victim's akumatization that they weren't there to witness, because it's part of their power. Remember when Monarch literally hears conversations happening all across Paris just to find a victim to akumatize? It's something similar to that. The butterfly holder can easily get a general grasp at a developing situation, as it would better help them manipulate their victim. Exhibit C. This apparent example of parallelism is just too circumstantial. If Alia broke the thought process and had been standing there, would you then claim that she's Chrysalis? It's just another example of, would the writer really think of that as a way to tell a story they want to tell? Would the writer do that because he thinks the viewer would notice that on a rewatch? I don't believe so. When it comes to Aglae's exit, it is weird, I'll give you that. But if that was Lila, don't you think she'd be smart enough to pre-set up an Akuma somewhere instead of having to noticeably dip out? Don't you think she could release it out in a hidden place instead of being absent from the party and maybe trying to see if anyone else leaves, which could allude to their identity as a miraculous? Considering Lila is considering Marinette to fit the bill as Ladybug, it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. Not to mention that when we see Lila at the end of the episode, her clothes are different to Aglae's. This is the only ending Chrysalis scene that we can assume actually took place in the same day of the contents of the episode, and unless there was some event between Aglae/Lila heading home and her writing in her notebook that would warrant a wardrobe change, then why would she change out of her Aglae costume just to write in her notebooks? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, that insinuates Lila changing her nails, clothes, and hair just to write in her notebooks. Exhibit D. This episode is going to backfire on the prosecution more than they know. When it comes to Aglae's retelling of her akumatization, it is true that the first victim could be overlooked in an investigation. Also, Aglae's claim of being the first akumatized victim of Chrysalis is indisputable because akumatizations are reported on by the news, and they surely keep records of this. So this needs to be true, or else this risks Aglae's reputation and Guy's in front of the therapist. This can also be said for her name and powers, as the news would have reported on this too, so it'd be easy to fact check. But that's not where the crux to focus on is coming from for the defense. We focus on the beginning. For starters, there's no reason to show Aglae talking to Chrysalis when she gets akumatized. Every single time Hawkmoth or Chrysalis talk to their victim, it's just a rehash of why they were akumatized. Something we already see because Aglae straight up told us. And then some slight manipulation before they accept the Akuma. Also, show don't tell is a load of hooey because storytelling is always a good mixture of both, not one over the other. Secondly, the facts about Aglae's powers and name being butterfly related don't really matter to the story because while the correlation is there between her and Lila, it isn't too important as it would be unwise for Lila to do that to herself in the first place. Next, when Aglae's brain gets scanned by Reckless Driver, this is the best evidence that we have that points at Aglae not being Lila. While it's true we've seen Lila not like bugs, conflating disgust or disdain with fear is a giant mistake. You often hate what you fear, but you don't often fear what you hate, and that's the base of this claim, a clear conflation. The prosecution also failed to point out a very important part of the episode, when Aglae is let go after being freed of her fears. But this doesn't seem to take effect on Chrysalis when she speaks directly to Reckless Driver. People we see be made fearless by Driver are literally impossible to calm down reasonably, yet Aglae in this state is meant to convince Driver to take Cat Noir's miraculous in such a calm and distinctive manner. All of this while also directly contradicting the changes that were made to her. Think about it. Why does Chrysalis try to convince Driver to take Cat Noir's miraculous? Because this is the closest she's been to getting it, and if she can't convince Driver to go with her plan, she might resist her Akuma. I don't know about you, but that motivation is soaked in fear, something Aglae is currently lacking severely. Exhibit E. Lila worker allegations. I want to point out that the defense not only doesn't believe Aglae to be Lila, but we also believe that it is impossible for Aglae to be an informant for Lila, sneaking her information about the group while also being a separate person. The main reason for this is that it doesn't make logical sense when analyzing it. Think about means, motive, and opportunity when analyzing Aglae. Despite being a new character to the season, she has answers that are way too ambiguous to both motive and opportunity. She has the means because we didn't know her prior to the season, but motive lacks because she seems like a nice person, unless this is a facade, which is likely. And opportunity also lacks because it probably happened before the season started. Instead, after the ruling is made, there is a suspect that the defense believes foots the bill better than Aglae, but we will let the jury deliberate before us. What is the final verdict? Is that really all the evidence pointing towards Aglae being Lila? Wow, this theory really is built on vibes. Either way, the prosecution did a very good job at putting reasonable suspicion upon Aglae, and while the defense did manage to bring up some good points, there were also a lot of points brought up by the prosecution that the defense failed to respond to. With that being said, my ruling on this topic is that Aglae is not Lila, nor do I believe she is a Lila worker. I know what you're gonna say. Clickbait, you didn't expose Lila's identity. Don't worry, viewer, I think I know who Lila is. It's nobody. I don't actually believe she enrolled in Marinette School, and if she did, I don't think it's a character that is of importance to the plot, or even been shown on screen yet. I do indeed think that Aglae is a red herring, but I do know who Lila's informant is. Lila's informant is Nelson, and Vampigami really hammered this one home for me. Let's start with my theory about Lila not attending the school in the first place. I don't think Lila has the capability to infiltrate the friend group herself for the same reason she would hire an informant in Nelson. While he's not a very good one, because an informant is supposed to be able to mingle with their targets to better obtain information, again, I don't think that's Lila's angle. Marinette's group of friends are morally upstanding people who ardently dislike people who are mean and abusive. They also fell victim to Lila's ruse, and on many occasions turned on their own friend of literal years in Marinette, as opposed to believing for a single second that Lila even could be lying. These people are also part-time superheroes. They have an obligation even more than before to be cautious. They know the capabilities of this new Hawkmoth, and they know if they give Cerise any advantage, that it could spell the end of everything. She's a force to be reckoned with. You give her an inch, she will take a nautical mile. I mean, she's so smart and ahead of Marinette that her plot armor had to step in and have Tiki notice a camera in the ceiling tile in Vampagami. Which, by the way, is crazy that she went for that when better disguised hidden cameras are not only cheap, but literally impossible to notice with the naked eye. Lila is going to have a hard time infiltrating the group. That's why she's using Nelson to slightly help her out in her other endeavors. Tipping her off to their appearance at the Rocky Horror Picture Show, trying to break up couples to weaken the group per se. Like if someone is majorly depressed, then they are liable to make mistakes. A perfect opportunity to do anything. I mean, for God's sake, she sat next to Nath for most of last school year. If Nelson breaks up Nath and Mark, leading to Nath being depressed, he's easier to play ball considering Lila probably learned a lot about him having sat next to him. That's not only an infiltration on Marinette's friend group, that's an infiltration to the miraculous, and that's the angle Lila is playing. Distrust in the group that only leads to more division amongst my Civil War theory. But back to the topic of Nelson. He also passes means, motive, and opportunity. Means. He has a powerful connection, mostly with Ray, which means we don't know who he could be connected to. Connecting with Lila is well within the possibility, when it is very doubtful in the case of Aglae. Motive. He's already a person of questionable moral character. Getting the chance to help in more villainy fits his budget. Opportunity. He's in the same boat as Aglae here, as it would have to happen off screen, and likely before the season starts. So possible and likely, but subject to change in the future. He also passes the detective's curse prerequisite. Nelson's character is laid out on the table, and his connection to Lila is very plausible. So plausible and noticeability that a viewer would hit themselves for not realizing in the first place upon rewatch. There is a slight flaw when it comes to Dark Castle. The question of how Lila gets the information that Marinette was absent at Alex's party. My theory answers this by stating that they were spying on couples looking for opportunities to strike like how they did in Vampagami. But we don't see them spying in the background at all, nor do we get confirmation that they even knew about the party in the first place. This would also slightly violate the prerequisite of the detective's curse, but I'd let it pass considering their history of doing such an action. It wouldn't be hard to piece together. But overall, Nelson fits the crime much better than Aglae. I believe him to be the informant for Lila that we've been searching for all season. Don't forget to tune into the channel this week. I've got a surprise on Thursday, and I've got an early Christmas present on Friday. Shout out to channel members Gerardo Rostero, Loki, and Harb. Like, subscribe, and have a great Thanksgiving.